Hello, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name's Jim. Happy New Year, everyone. How is everybody doing? It's weird to be back. So, first off, welcome back to the JTC podcast. I am your host, Jim the Cynic, and I'm by myself again, so I get confused sometimes of whether I can even call this a podcast. I really don't know what else to call it at the moment. Suppose you can call it like a podcast-based video, but I know a lot of people say that podcasts are usually like, oh, you need a guest, and occasionally I do have guests, like I've spoke to my sister on this podcast so far, the one over on Nebcam Gaming, there's always my buddy Ben. So anyway, before I get into the topics that I want to talk about today, I just want to wish everybody a Happy New Year. I hope you had a good Christmas, hope you had a holly jolly good time, and you got everything you wanted. I hope the people that don't have a PS5 yet managed to get one, or your mum or dad brought you one, or your boyfriend or girlfriend brought you one, or whatever. I hope everyone's doing okay, and everyone's happy. So, anyway, before I get into today's topics, I also want to say, just to elaborate a little more on my last video where I talked about 2 shows and 1 goal. So, basically, 2 shows and 1 goal, that is still going ahead. I'm still very, very interested in that sort of topic, talking about all the TV shows. But when it comes to my podcast, the JTC podcast, short for Jim the Cynic, I am going to, I will talk about occasional new stuff. Like, mostly this podcast will probably be new stuff, and then the scripted stuff and what I put most of my time and editing into will be the TV shows, etc., etc. So, yeah. So also, for those who haven't seen my Instagram post that I put up last night, if I just get that up, so I remember what I said word from word, I put, hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well. Since my heart hasn't been with movies lately, I decided to do an end-of-year ranking of every new TV show that I saw instead, which is this episode right here. I couldn't find time to squeeze in Andor and plenty of other shows, which are probably great that I probably missed. There's Umbrella Academy Season 3, The Boys Season 2, didn't have a chance to squeeze all those in, unfortunately. And but I will, however, be doing a separate video on top 10 movies that I saw in 2022, similar style to this, lightly edited, because I do want to talk about some of the films that I saw in 2022. And yeah, so anyway, if we're going to get into this list today, I only saw 9 brand new TV shows in 2022. Now that's a record for me, because usually when it comes to TV shows, I only manage to squeeze in like 4 or 5. In 2022, I managed to squeeze in 9, which is an improvement. Like, I don't know how I think it's because since I stopped soaring. I can't speak English. Because I stopped seeing new films at the cinema, which I'll elaborate on as well in a second. I had more time to sit at home and watch TV shows. So that's basically it. So anyway, why haven't I been seeing new films? I elaborate a little bit in this video right here where I talk about what I hate about the cinema. There's one point that I made in it where I said that going to the cinema is giving me more anxiety than it's worth now, because every single time I go, it's like there's an itching voice at the back of my head, kicking me in my shins, like full on giving me a huge slap on the arse, and it's leaving huge handprints on my bare arse. That's how much anxiety it's giving me. So it's like this is constantly at the back of my head every single time I go. I'm going to go in there, and there's going to be some shithead talking on his phone. There's going to be a couple making out in the cinema, or some immature kids or something like that. And that is constantly on my mind now, and it's really, really dampened my enjoyment of the cinema. So until I sort of shrug off that feeling, hopefully I will one day, then I'll start seeing new films again. So it's kind of made my heart go elsewhere. Mainly towards video games and TV shows. So TV shows is something I can sit at home, I can enjoy it, don't have to listen to anyone talk, just me, by myself, me and my cat anyway. I will pre-warn you as well, if you hear any noise in the background, I do apologise, that's just my cat playing. Until I figure out how to like drown out background noise when it comes to audio, that's something I'm working on with my editing skills. He's going to be quite noisy, so anyway, let's get into this list today, just so I'm not rambling on forever and ever and ever. Toasted the new year with a can of Pepsi. So, 9 TV shows that I saw in 2022. Since I only saw 9, there are going to be like plenty of TV shows on this list, which you'll be like, that should be above that, or that should be above that. or that's terrible, so why is it even in your top 9? Well, since I only saw 9, there are going to be a couple of bad shows on this list towards the bottom, because they're one of the 9 shows that I saw. So that's probably why they're on the list in the first place. If I saw a majority of TV shows, if I had the time to do that sort of thing, then these shows wouldn't even be close to a top 10. Not even close. Some of them will be, but the bottom couple that I'm talking about, or I'm going to start talking about now, aren't. So I hope that clarifies everything. Let's get going. So, at number 9, and the worst show that I saw in 2022, She-Hulk. Now, I really didn't want to see this. I really didn't want to see it. From the first trailer, I just had a bad vibe from it. Not because, it's controversial or something, but mainly because it looked awful from the trailers. The humour didn't land in the trailers. The CGI on She-Hulk looked unfinished, unpolished. It's like all the budget went towards Mark Ruffalo's Hulk in terms of the CGI department and Abomination. But the worst CGI by far is on the main protagonist. I mean, I don't know how that works, but apparently it does now. And Marvel have crapped out a lot of shit in 2022. Like, there are some... I wouldn't really say that it's Marvel fatigue that I'm getting, like a lot of other people are saying, like, they're getting fatigue from Marvel products. I think the fatigue, for me, is coming from just watching bad TV shows and bad movies. That's where the fatigue is coming from. I'm just tired of seeing shit coming from Marvel. Like, I really want them to do something good in 2023. The only Marvel product which I'm really looking forward to this year is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. That's the only interest that I really have in the MCU at the moment. The Guardians are pretty much holding it together for me. And this is the last time I'm going to see them anyway, so I really don't know. I really don't know what's going to happen after this. But getting into She-Hulk, where do I begin? I've talked about the CGI. It just looks awful in places. I mean, I've seen a lot of comparisons to like the early 2000s CGI with like Ang Lee's Hulk and the 2003 Daredevil. Yeah, I get that. I don't think it's quite as bad as what we had back there. But there is still CGI that I see from the early 2000s, like in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films. That's better than what we have now, which completely blows my mind because, as you can see, noise in the background, which completely blows my mind because it's like if Marvel and Disney focused on pumping out quality over quantity, maybe there would be enough budget left for these VFX artists, VFX artists to actually, like make good-looking characters and, improve upon the CGI, make it look good. Because it's mad how we go from looking at something like Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, where the detail in the CGI was really good in a lot of places. I mean, obviously you can tell it's CGI, but the detail on Thanos compared to what we get in Marvel now just completely blows my mind. It's just astounding how much worse the CGI has gotten. And that's because, well, I'm not going to spout this out as fact because I don't know the business side of it. I'm not a filmmaker. I don't know how this stuff works, but I think since there's so much crap going out all at once, the CGI isn't being there's not enough care being put into it, and then we get characters that look like She-Hulk. Now, first off, let's talk about the characters in this show in general. Now, Jennifer Walters, I think she's a likeable enough character had it been written a lot differently. I mean, I'm not blaming Tatiana Maslany at all because I think Tatiana Maslany is a very, very good actress. I've seen her in Orphan Black and she's really good in that show. Granted, I only got past the first 2 seasons of Orphan Black before stopping. I will go back to it eventually. Blah, 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 blah. All stuff like that. So, Tatiana Maslany is a good actress. Jennifer Walters as a concept and as a character, it could work, but the writing in this show is just terrible. It's like, I've seen so many things online where it's basically like, oh, women good, men bad. And that's kind of how it feels sometimes. I don't really like to talk about the political side of things when it comes to my content and stuff like that. But when it comes to She-Hulk, within the first episode, I just knew something was wrong, because it's when Bruce Banner and She-Hulk are sitting down at Bruce's holiday home or whatever. Just, he's trying to teach her how to manage her powers and how to do this, and that. And then she just goes out on an all-out tangent on him, how she can control her powers better than him. And from that get-go, I just had an off vibe about the whole thing. And throughout the entire show, it's like there are tons and tons of male arsehole characters, and the women are portrayed as always good, like no flaws. That's what it's like with She-Hulk as a character, with Jen Walters as a character. It's kind of like she doesn't have any flaws. It's like around episode 7, I think, when she's like, my life is falling apart. That's really the only point in the show that I really think that something bad's happening to her, but she's still pretty much a flawless character. And I find it hard to root for characters like that are just so overly perfect, and you can't sympathise with them, you can't grow with them, because they're pretty much where they want to be. She-Hulk gets these powers, and then suddenly she's a very accepted member of society almost immediately. I mean, obviously you have the arseholes in the background making this huge conspiracy about her, and there's like these these gatherings where they talk about her and stuff like that, and how much she's a menace to society and blah 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 blah. But the show doesn't give me any reason to give a shit about Jen Walters as a character, to give a shit about She-Hulk as a character. So other than that, there's the other stuff in the show just doesn't work for me. Now, when it comes to the law side of it, because it's called She-Hulk Attorney at Law or something like that, Jen Walters is an attorney, and you get all these different cases where she tries to help these different people. There's even one episode where there's like this other person trying to capitalize on her name with some kind of perfume product or something, calling that She-Hulk, and she's like, no, I'm She-Hulk, despite initially not wanting that name in the first place. Stuff like that. I don't think the law stuff is engaging. I don't think it's written well enough. I don't think it's interesting. I don't think it's fun. There is way better stuff in Daredevil when it comes to law stuff and, courtroom cases and stuff like that, which is so much better than what we have here. Another thing I hate about this show is the Abomination. Now, I think it's perfectly fine if you want to revitalise a character and make them good again, but I would have absolutely loved to have seen Emil Blonsky escape from prison and start causing havoc, and maybe that could be the main threat or whatever. Again, I'm not a writer. I don't really know how I'd improve this piece of crap of a show. I really don't know. They dumbed down this character so goddamn much. I mean, yeah, I get it. 10 or more years from the Incredible Hulk film up until now, people do change. I get that. But Emil Blonsky's character just feels so different. Like, different to the point where he's just weird. And like, this show tries to put a comedic spin on him, and I don't remember laughing at anything in this show. Like, for one, the show is labelled as a comedy, right? She-Hulk has these fourth wall breaking things where, she talks about, she just suddenly turns to the camera and addresses the audience. Now, this can be done right. Obviously, Deadpool is proof of that. But when it comes to this show, there's just something off-putting about it and something weird. Like, it just does not work. It does not work for me. I don't think it works in the concept of the overall show. And I get it, She-Hulk broke the fourth wall in the comics as well. But obviously, I don't think that was translated onto the small screen well at all. And I think the only thing that I really smiled about in this show was seeing Daredevil do a walk of shame. It's like, in the episode where he turns up, which was the only reason I even watched this show, because I didn't know if it had any ties into Daredevil Reborn that's coming out in 2024, or is filming in 2024, I don't know. I didn't know if this show had any ties into that, and it doesn't look like it does, or maybe it's referenced in Daredevil Reborn, I really don't know, but when She-Hulk and Daredevil meet, they have a night of intimacy, well, they fuck. So Daredevil and She-Hulk, they fuck. And Daredevil walks out of She-Hulk's house in the morning and walks past someone and just goes, "Morning." That got a little bit of a giggle out of me. But everything else in the show just falls really flat in terms of comedy. And the characters are annoying. And I don't know what else to say about it. But I will get into the ending at least. The ending is not a fucking ending. This ending is probably one of the worst endings that I've seen, not only in Marvel, and for something of quality like Marvel, well, should I say, used to be quality of Marvel, I expect so much better than a shit ending like this. This is where my cynical side really comes in, because it's like, the whole show leading up to this point in the finale seems completely pointless now. It's like things are resolved off screen. We see that clip of like She-Hulk on the Disney Plus front page going into this other thing and confronting Kevin Feige and like saying like, "Oh no, you can't write the ending like this," or whatever like that. I get what they were going for. They were trying to be funny. But then everything is just resolved off screen. It's like there's no conflict, there's no impact, there's no emotion, there's nothing that can get you invested in this ending, because it just resolves itself for the sake of a joke. Now, this is probably worse than what WandaVision did to Quicksilver. You know, like when he turned out to be a guy called Ralph Boner. Oh, Marvel sacrificed this interesting concept of bringing Evan Peters' Quicksilver into this universe for a boner joke. This is so much worse. This is so much fucking worse. Oh, and what else? Daredevil's costume, it's alright. It looks a bit weird in the daylight, but yeah. I'm just going to move on. And I'm not denying that She-Hulk as a character could be amazing. You know, like I'm pretty sure she's cool in the comics. I don't read comics, so I don't know, but I'm pretty sure that she's cool in the comics. This just was not translated well at all. And I think the producer or the director, whatever the person's name is, came out and said that this show is accurate to the comics. But I suppose there's a very fine line between what can work in a TV show and what can work in a comic book. It's why a lot of book adaptations aren't usually translated very well, or when it comes to video game adaptations, they're not usually translated very well at all. That curse in terms of video games is slowly breaking when it comes to like movies like Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Best video game movie of all time, if you ask me. But yeah, She-Hulk is an awful show. It's awful. I hated like probably every waking second of it. And that's weird for me to say when it comes to Marvel, because there's been plenty of like shit Marvel stuff coming out, but I think She-Hulk just tops everything in terms of how bad it is. It's so bad. And I think, well, one more thing I will add when it comes to Marvel and their comedy. In the past, Marvel have always had like a pretty good blend between comedy and action and serious stakes. Thor Ragnarok did this really well. And then they bring out a film like Thor Love and Thunder, where it's just a little too overly goofy. I mean, I get the comedy worked in Ragnarok, but it just doesn't work in Thor Love and Thunder. I've heard stuff like, oh, it's a parody of itself. I'm not really going to go into that because it's been said enough. But when it comes to She-Hulk as a show, the comedy didn't land. The show's not funny. Every man character is bad. And just a bunch of other things. So, yeah. Let's move on, shall we? The next show on this list at number 8 is The Book of Boba Fett. Now, I'm not going to dive into this too much because I already dived into it in another video I did called Short Reviews. Check out that if you want my thoughts on The Book of Boba Fett. But I will talk about it a little bit just for the sake of this being my list and all that sort of stuff. The Book of Boba Fett. Let's see. This show is pretty damn bad as well. Towards the end of the season, we do have some really good Mandalorian stuff, but it's really weird how the Mandalorian just appears in this show. And I mentioned back in that video about short reviews that I think it's kind of a cheap move on Disney's end to try and shoehorn Mando into the Book of Boba Fett. So that means you have to watch this show now to understand some really important story arcs for Mandalorian Season 3. I don't like that. I think you could have perfectly established Mando as a character in his own show But no one gives a shit about this crappy show, so let's just put Mando in it, so people have to watch it, so they understand what's going on in Mando Season 3. If you get what I'm saying. Stuff on the lines of that. And there's characters like Cad Bane and stuff that appear in this show, and the show does a piss poor job at establishing who he is. For example, my dad watched the Book of Boba Fett, and he was like, oh yeah, they introduced a new character who died at the end. And I was like, Dad, Cad Bane is not a new character. So, I get it. It's really cool that Disney are trying to implement, characters from the Clone Wars and Rebels into these live-action shows. I didn't mind Rosario Dawson's Ahsoka that much. I didn't mind her. She was fine. The actress that played... I forgot the fuck's the character's name? Bo-Katan, that's it, Bo-Katan. She was fine, but obviously these Star Wars shows are not doing a very good job at explaining or establishing who these characters are. You don't have to go into immense depth. Just mention something in dialogue, or do a show don't tell moment, a flashback or something like that. Maybe recreate a few scenes from the animated series and put it in live action. Or just something, something, instead of these characters just showing up and then Boba Fett being like, oh, it's Cad Bane. For example, people like my dad are not interested in the animated Star Wars. Animation in TV and film is not his cup of tea, which is fine. I highly recommend it to him that he watch it, because I think Clone Wars really amplifies the emotions in the prequels and makes some of them better. Well, I wouldn't say it made the prequels better. The prequels are still what they are, but you have a little more appreciation for the story with these added elements to it. I guess that's the best way I can put it. But my dad's just not into that sort of stuff, so he went into the Book of Boba Fett thinking Cad Bane was a new character that was just killed off almost immediately. And it wasn't until I explained who Cad Bane was that he was like, oh, okay. So, do you see what I mean? There's stuff like that. And the character of Boba Fett himself is just weird, because this show is based not long after Return of the Jedi, right? Because Boba Fett gets swallowed by the Sarlacc thanks to Han Solo accidentally breaking his jetpack. That's still really funny, accidentally breaking his jetpack. And what can I say? And then he goes on this moral high ground randomly. I mean, I get that near-death experiences can sometimes change people, but it just doesn't fit his character. I think Boba Fett as a character works better as the guy who sits in the background, doesn't say anything, looks cool, standing there with his badass weapon, occasionally cracking a line of dialogue, but then when it comes to this show, making everything about him, and then Boba Fett is suddenly this morally grounded person who wants to rule Tatooine with respect. This seems very out of character for him. I think Boba Fett, literally, once he got out of that Sarlacc pit, he will be gunning for Han Solo. He will be gunning for Luke or Lando, the people that put him there in the first place. But no, that's not what we get, I'm afraid. And I'm not going to dive into too much more, because I did explain in much more depth about the Book of Boba Fett in my short reviews video. Check that out if you want more elaboration and stuff like that. But yeah, that's that. Moving on. Next up on this list is the Obi-Wan Kenobi show. Again, I did a full JTC podcast episode based on just this show alone. If you want my full thoughts, you can check that out. But I'll talk about it a little bit here as well. Don't worry, not everything's going to be like this, because there are plenty of other things I want to talk about in this. So, the Kenobi show was a huge and massive disappointment to me. Why is it slightly ahead of Book of Boba Fett, may you say? Because the Kenobi show, as pretty awful as it was, if I'm being really honest, there were still moments of greatness which I don't think were utilised that much, or at all. And to me personally, that's what pisses me off a lot more about Kenobi than Boba Fett. Overall, I thought Kenobi was a much more watchable show. Obviously, I'm not sure if I'm biased there when it comes to my love of the character of Obi-Wan and Ewan McGregor coming back and Hayden Christensen coming back as Vader. I'm not sure if it's anything to do with that. Probably is, but I digress. It was really hard for me to pick between the Book of Boba Fett and the Kenobi, which one I thought was better, because they're both kind of on equal terms of being kind of bad. But I think Kenobi was the one that pissed me off more, because this is something that should have been great. They brought back an iconic character after all these years, and they do nothing with him. They do nothing to establish who he is. He's totally different. Oh, this is actually a perfect opportunity for me to retract on one point that I said in my podcast episode of Kenobi before. So, I did correct myself in the pinned comment, but not everyone reads pinned comments, so let me just explain here. I said in my Obi-Wan Kenobi podcast review that I liked that Obi-Wan closed himself off from the Force and that he gradually got it back over time. And yeah, because it reminded me of the way Star Wars Fallen Order, Jedi Fallen Order, the game, did it with Cal Kestis. Now, I want to correct myself on something. Cal Kestis as a character in that game, it worked for him. It worked for his character, because Cal Kestis is a character that lost his master, lost pretty much everything, had to go into exile as a kid, growing up on his own. Obi-Wan, on the other hand, it doesn't work for him, so I want to retract the point where I said that I liked the idea. Because when I really thought about it afterwards, and when one of my friends pointed it out, I was like, you son of a bitch, you're actually kind of right there. So, I'm going to retract that point right now. No longer valid in that video. So, for Obi-Wan as a character, for him to close himself off from the Force, doesn't make sense for him as a character. It's like the writers of this show don't understand Obi-Wan. Because the thing is, Obi-Wan even contradicts himself in this show. He's having these struggles in unlocking the Force and opening himself back up to it and stuff like that. But he himself literally said, his own mouth, his own words, he said to Luke's Uncle Owen, when the time comes, the boy must be trained. Well, here's the thing, Obi-Wan. How are you going to train him if you're closed off from the Force? It kind of seems that Obi-Wan is a different person than who he was. I mean, I get that they're trying to transfigure this Obi-Wan in the show to who we saw in A New Hope with Alec Guinness's version of Obi-Wan, but they butchered it. Obi-Wan is a guy that stands for loyalty, doing the right thing, putting others before him, and I just don't think that Obi-Wan would allow himself to fall into a pit so deep that he closes himself off from the Force. He dedicated his life on Tatooine to looking out for Luke, protecting Luke, being there for him, training him when the time comes. So it doesn't make sense for Obi-Wan to allow this to happen to himself. I would believe that Obi-Wan would be a guy who, he could be a bit rusty, that's fine, but not close himself off from the Force fully, and then it takes a span of like 6 episodes, which all feel like one interconnected movie, rather than a TV show with the way it's structured. It doesn't feel like Obi-Wan is the same character as we see in the prequels or in A New Hope. That's just how it feels to me. So I retract that point. If anyone wants to give me a valid reason of why I'm wrong or something like that, please feel free to point it out. I do find it really interesting when it comes to film criticism and TV criticism, how you can sort of think about different things, and when your mind is very much set on something and then someone says something, then you're like, oh, okay, interesting. Stuff like that. So if anyone wants to drop me a reason of why I'm wrong or something like that, or they disagree with me, or even if they agree with me, please leave it below. I'd love to hear it, honestly. As long as you're not a dickhead. Everything else in terms of thoughts that I have about Obi-Wan, the TV show, they're in that podcast episode, which I still very much agree with. I just wanted to retract that one point, and I thought this was the best opportunity to do that. So, there we go. Number 6 is Ms. Marvel. Now, when it comes to Ms. Marvel, the show, I was kind of hooked in like the first couple of episodes. I really liked how grounded it was. It reminded me of how grounded the first couple of Spider-Man films were, that not everything had to be world-ending. The actress that plays Kamala Khan, I'm very sorry, I can't remember her name. I don't want to try and pronounce it in case I get it wrong. So, yeah, I thought she was great. I thought she was fantastic. Very, very good in this role. But where Ms. Marvel lost me is with the same trap that most of these Disney Plus shows fall into. is that it feels like it should have been a movie. It's like it's condensed into... Well, not condensed, sorry. It's like shoved into a TV show and then stretched out, bigger than my arse cheeks, to span out over 6 episodes. And I think a lot of the shows in Disney Plus have this same problem. They could easily be films. Just make them movies, man. Oh, but I think I know why you're not. Because you need content for your crappy streaming platform. I take that back. Not everything on it's crappy. Like there's some good stuff on it, but you get what I'm saying. Ms. Marvel goes from a very grounded coming of age sort of story, and then leads into more world-ending stuff. Like there's a certain point where, like, please stop trying to end the world, because it feels less impactful every single time. When it came to, like, Infinity War and Endgame, there were plenty of other things in terms of Marvel that were grounded, that didn't feel like it was world-ending. And since Endgame, it's kind of like every bad guy wants to take over the goddamn world. I mean, I'm not saying every single one does it. Spider-Man No Way Home technically wasn't a world-ending thing. No, sorry, it was. Spider-Man Far From Home, that's the one I meant to say, was not a world-ending thing. Falcon and the Winter Soldier, not a world-ending thing, perfectly fine. Let's see, what else? She-Hulk, I suppose, not a world-ending thing. There's quite a few things post-Endgame which are not world-ending threats, but then there's a lot of it that is. Eternals, end of world stakes. Ms. Marvel, end of world stakes. Spider-Man No Way Home, end of world stakes. Thor Love and Thunder, guy killing all the gods. I suppose you can call that the end of the Nine Realms or whatever. But it's just so tiresome. Like, I don't want another world-ending story to the point where it feels so uneventful that I just don't give a shit. I want more grounded stuff. That's what Ms. Marvel started out like, and then it moved into this whole thing about, this villain wants to do this, but to do so, it means ending the planet or whatever. It's just so tiresome, and I'm getting really sick and tired of these same tropes being played over and over and over and over again. I don't know. I really don't know. And also, Ms. Marvel's powers were cool, but I generally, subjectively, I suppose, prefer stretchy powers. But I get they don't want 2 major superheroes having stretchy powers when there's a Fantastic Four film coming out. Obviously, Reed Richards does have those sort of powers. The only reason I can think they changed Kamala Khan's powers was because of this. I could be wrong. But I generally prefer her to have powers like that. Like in the Avengers game, for example. For all that game's flaws, the campaign, Ms. Marvel's story, Kamala Khan as a character, being this Avengers superfan, I really did enjoy that. I like Kamala Khan as a character. And the actress in this show, I think she's really good. She's charming. She's likeable. She's great. But then you shove her into a show like this, and I just slowly start to lose interest. Now, when it comes to comparing it to She-Hulk or Falcon and the Winter Soldier or fucking Moon Knight or Loki, yes, I said Loki. Maybe I'll get into that another time, but I would generally much rather watch Ms. Marvel over them. I'm going to get shit on for saying Loki now, aren't I? Anyway, I'm going to move on. I don't really have much more to add to it. It does pique my interest a little bit how Ms. Marvel in this show is going to interact with Captain Marvel and what was the other character's name? Monica from WandaVision, I think. I think she's going to be in it too. So there's that. Yeah, very interesting stuff. Looking forward to it. As long as it's better than the first Captain Marvel film, and they make Captain Marvel's character better in almost every single aspect, then yeah, I suppose. Alright, so, moving on. Number 5. This one is going to be a hard one to talk about because it's one of those things which Netflix are annoyingly doing lately, which is like releasing half of a season and then a few months later they'll release the rest of it. That's Sonic Prime. Now, this year has pretty much been the year for Sonic. Sorry, 2022 was the year for Sonic. We have Sonic the Hedgehog 2, the movie. We have Sonic Origins, Sonic Frontiers, and then Sonic Prime. Last year, it's still getting used to it, it's still January, man. It's pretty much been a really good year for the Speedy Hedgehog. Sonic Prime, on the other hand, I think there are aspects of this show that I really like and aspects that I don't. But it's kind of hard to have a full opinion and, get out my thoughts completely and have a proper thought process when there's only half a season here. So I'll try and talk about what I saw, what I liked, what I didn't like. What I really like is the voice actor for Sonic. I really like this guy. I think his name's Devon something. I really like this voice actor. He sounds like Sonic, very, very close to Roger Craig Smith from the games. Obviously, Roger Craig Smith, over the past couple of years, has really grown on me as Sonic's voice. I'm still not sure whether I prefer Roger or Jason Griffiths from the older 4Kids era of Sonic, but when it comes to Devon as Sonic, I think this guy is very, very good as a voice actor for Sonic. And the animation style, I really do like it. It's like CGI cutscenes that you'd see in Sonic games, but obviously better. Because, I'm not really going to get into the cutscenes in Sonic games because that's an entire new podcast entirely to talk about stuff like that. But when it comes to the CGI and the animation in Sonic Prime, I think it's really good. I enjoy it. I like how when Sonic runs, you can see his legs spinning around like in the classic 2D games or Sonic Lost World as well. That's pretty good. And I generally really enjoy the concept of this Shatterverse. Now, I know a lot of things are doing this lately. A lot of things are doing this lately when it comes to multi-universe stuff. Obviously, Marvel are doing it now. Ratchet and Clank are doing it. Crash Bandicoot are kind of doing it with time travel aspects. I enjoy the concept of the Shatterverse quite a lot. And the different variations of the characters, different versions of Tails, Amy, and Knuckles, and Rouge. Right, I had to pause. I just had a massive sneezing fit that just wouldn't fucking stop. So, I like the overall concept of the Shatterverse and all these different variations of the characters. However, this generally wouldn't have been a problem to me initially, but Sonic's character in this show feels completely different than what we see in the games. Sonic has always been confident, or overly confident. He's always been ready to throw himself into situations where the odds are stacked up against him and still walk away smiling. This Sonic, on the other hand, just seems quite inconsiderate to his friends' feelings and a bit stupid in places, or dumb, as you can probably call it. This initially wouldn't have been a problem to me if Sonic Prime was something separate to the Sonic games, but it's been confirmed apparently that Sonic Prime is canon to the games. So the characterization of Sonic, it clashes in some kind of way, where the Sonic in the games is very headstrong, willing to throw himself into situations, confident, and this Sonic in the show just seems a bit inconsiderate at times. That's the only thing that really bugs me about it. And I also think with what Netflix have given us with these 8 episodes, they've just left it halfway through. It's like, imagine watching an episode of TV, right, and it cuts off before it even gets an ending. I get cliffhangers and all that sort of stuff, but I'm talking about, imagine if you're watching Daredevil, right, and Matt Murdock's about to take on Fisk for the first time, right? They're about to clash, and then suddenly it just stops. That's kind of how it felt like with how they ended things in the first half of this season. I really hope that when Sonic Prime comes back, it can give us more, maybe the rest of the season. And I really think that Sonic Prime, right now, what I see is a little meh. Like, it kind of retreads the same story threads a couple of times with Sonic going to a different Shatterverse and trying to convince the variations of his friends to get on and try and solve their problem. This happens about 3 times, from what I can remember. Sonic goes to this city place, this pirate place, this another place, I can't really remember, this jungle place, the jungle place, sorry. Yeah, so there's like 3 different universes that Sonic has gone to try and fix the problems of his friends in that said universe. But once I've already seen it, I don't want to see him fix the same character's problems again and again and again. It's kind of like this first half of the season is nothing but episodes building into something more, if that makes sense. So like, these episodes are episodic and grounded, but they don't lead anywhere, and it's kind of frustrating when they give us not even half of a season. It doesn't even feel like this was the halfway point either. But I am optimistic that Sonic Prime will drastically improve once we get more. But as of the 8 episodes that I've seen right now, I'm just not that big on what I see. But I do like the animation style, I do like the action, I do like Devon as Sonic, the voice cast are all great. The guy that plays Eggman, this Eggman is no Mike Pollock, but does a damn good job of impersonating him at least. So I'm going to move on, because this video is already getting a little long. So, coming in at number 4, we have Cobra Kai Season 5. Now, Cobra Kai is one of the most bingeable pieces of media and TV that I think are on Netflix. So, I rewatched the entire thing leading up to Season 5, and I binged through the entire thing. I managed to get it just on point to the point where Season 4 ended and then Season 5 came out. I had to wait maybe a day before I'm not watching an episode. And I really, really like this show. I'll admit, I didn't really care much for the Karate Kid movies back in the 80s and early 90s. The first Karate Kid film, I don't think it's all that. But, however, Cobra Kai is a pretty damn good show. And I really, really enjoy a lot of aspects of this show. I think the way it implicates the older characters from the movies, like Johnny and Daniel, being mentors for these kids like Miguel, Robbie, Hawk, Dimitri, Sam, a lot of other people. I think that is where the show is at its strongest. However, in Season 5, we didn't really get all that. It was more of a personal story between Daniel, Johnny, and Terry Silver, and mixing it up a little bit with Kreese in the prison. Now, I enjoyed all that stuff about Kreese. Terry Silver as a villain is probably one of the best villains of 2022. I think he's one of the best villains of 2022 when it comes to just being a striking menace, a force to be reckoned with, and a terrifying villain. The way he can just walk around doing these horrible things and smiling the entire time. The fucker smiles through most of this. This guy is sick. And I really enjoyed his character. I really thought that Terry Silver as a character was great. I still enjoy all of the mentor characters like Daniel and Johnny. I really think that their rivalry has come to a point where they can now consider themselves as friends. I mean, like in that one episode where Daniel charges into Johnny's house, being an absolute dick because his life's fallen apart. He's fallen out with Amanda. There's stuff going on at home. Terry Silver is making Daniel's life very, very hard. Daniel waltzes into Johnny's flat, starts being a dickhead, and instead of causing a fight or rebelling, Johnny actually sits Daniel down and talks to him as a friend. He's like, "Hey, you okay, man?" And then Daniel realises, like, what am I doing? So it's great to see, like, over the course of these 5 seasons, Daniel's and Johnny's friendship, their rivalry, has kind of come to a concluding point where they can have mutual respect for each other. Maybe not necessarily friends, but enough respect for each other that they can help each other out in dire situations. And plus, they mentor many of the same kids. That's what I really liked. However, what I really did enjoy about the first 4 seasons was the mentor and the apprentice kind of approach to it. Like Johnny training Miguel, Daniel training Robbie, a redemption arc for Hawk, and Dimitri coming out of his shell, Sam overcoming her anxiety and fear over Tori. That was all done pretty damn well. We just don't see much of that in this season. So Cobra Kai at this point has expanded immensely. And there's a character which was in Season 4. Her name is Devon. I can't remember. Not from Sonic I was just talking about, but the character's name's Devon. And I really enjoyed the character arc that they tried to give her here. They tried to big her up as a character that could be a rival for Tori, like a new rival or something like that. I mean, the evil Korean lady, I forgot her name, I'm really sorry. She even said that, do you think Devon could take out Tori Nichols to Terry Silver. And we just don't get to see that because the season pretty much wraps up everything that we've had over the past 5 seasons. It wraps up pretty much everything in terms of characterization, shutting down Cobra Kai. But I really don't think this is going to be the end. I mean, other things that it wrapped up Miguel and Robbie becoming friends. Robbie making amends with everyone that he wronged in the past couple of seasons, like Daniel and Sam, Miguel, Johnny, just everything like that. It pretty much wraps it all up, so I really don't know where they can go from here. So as much as I enjoyed the fights, the inner struggles with the mentors, Terry Silver as a villain, it's kind of a frustrating season at the same time because there are certain characters that I absolutely loved in the old seasons, such as Hawk, for example, and they don't really do much with him in this season. Like, if you're a huge Hawk fan, you are going to be a little let down in this season by the lack of him and what he can do. But yeah, overall, that's really all I have to add about Cobra Kai Season 5. Oh, actually, no, I'm lying. Chosen in this season was probably my favourite character. The guy just has an overall charm to him. He's hilarious. Being from this guy that tried to kill Daniel back in one of the Karate Kid films, I think it was the 3rd one, leading up until who he is now, helping Daniel, living at his house, being a slob. Amanda's getting pissed off at Daniel for letting Chosen stay around. And there's just something so charming and that makes you have a massive smile on your face when you see Johnny, Daniel, and Chosen all just sitting in a limo, completely piss-arse drunk, singing Eye of the Tiger. That was such a charming scene. And since I watched that scene, I took up boxing. It's weird. I took up boxing because the Eye of the Tiger song reminded me of Rocky, and I started watching the YouTuber boxing with like KSI and stuff like that. And now, when I do my boxing workouts, I listen to Eye of the Tiger. And I have Cobra Kai to thank for that, I think. You would think Rocky, I thank Rocky, but I haven't seen the Rocky films in quite in a few years, actually. So, yeah. Cobra Kai, generally, the fight choreography is good. I just wish they did a little more with the characters when it comes to the kids. And one more thing I will add before moving on to my number 3 spot is that Devon as a character sort of left Johnny's Eagle Fang without any explanation. And the one scene where Johnny sees Devon training in Cobra Kai, he wants to go inside Cobra Kai to try and talk to her. Chosen stops him. They don't really elaborate any further than that. He's like, that's my student. So it kind of sounded like Johnny had some kind of dedication to try and fix things with Devon, but then we never see an interaction from them in the whole season of what I remember. I mean, it's been a couple of months, so correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, overall, I really did enjoy Cobra Kai Season 5 and overall Cobra Kai as a season. I don't know what they're going to do with Season 6, just please don't ruin it, because you've wrapped pretty much everything up. If you just let Kreese die in that prison and Terry Silver be arrested, I think Season 5 could have been a good closing off point. But then again, there's still these massive like karate championships, which are yet to be, hosted and stuff like that. So I guess that's what Season 6 will be about. Maybe Kreese will return as the villain. I don't know, but I'm looking forward to it regardless. At my number 3 spot is All of Us Are Dead. Now, again, I also talked about this show in my short reviews video. If you want more elaboration, check that out. But for what I can say about it here, I'm going to keep these really, really brief because the last 2 TV shows I really do want to talk a little more in depth about rather than a show that I've already talked about. So I'm just going to brush past this one pretty quickly. It does nothing remotely original with its concept in terms of zombies invading certain places and survival aspects and characters getting killed off and stuff like that. But I think from an overall entertainment aspect when it comes to zombies killing people, the emotions of the characters and the action, I think that's where its strong suit is. I like the characters. Namra is still my favourite character. I can't wait to see what they do in Season 2 with this show in general. So if you want more in-depth thoughts on this show itself, please check out my short reviews video. I will link that down below in the description. So there we go. At the number 2 spot, everyone, it's Alice in Borderland Season 2. Now, what I really enjoyed about Alice in Borderland, the first season, I remember back when I saw it in 2020, I watched an episode a night, and that would be the thing that I looked forward to for the rest of the day. Like, what was going to happen next to these characters that I grew to love. Because from the first episode, from the get-go, it establishes perfectly what kind of show it is. It throws you straight into the action, not long after a few characterization moments and trying to, establish who these characters are. And it throws you straight into the suspense that if you don't compete in these death-defying games, you are going to die. And obviously, this show has a really likeable cast of characters. I really liked Arisu. I am going to apologise if I mispronounce any of these names, but yeah, so we have Arisu, Usagi, Kuina, Chisaya, Shibuki, Niragi, Aguni, and Anne. I really do enjoy every single one of these characters. I think my favourite was actually Chisaya. I'm really sorry if I pronounced that wrong, I probably have. But what I really liked about his character, he's a very reserved, sort of calm and collected character. Very strange as well. I think what really intrigued me about his character was that he reminded me a lot of L from Death Note. L is a very introverted and odd sort of character, really calm and collected when it comes to serious situations, and that's kind of the same for Shisaya here, because he is so relaxed when it comes to these games, but he always manages to twist it in his favour, whether it's through manipulation or his clever wits, and he manages to clear every single game that he's in. It seems like he doesn't even struggle to do it either, which is what made him my favourite character. Now, Arisu, on the other hand, and Usagi are the main duo of the show. And I really enjoy both of their arcs. Arisu developed himself from this kind of a shitty person, neglecting his family, playing video games all the time, although I don't blame him. I think if I had time to do that, I probably would too. But playing video games to the point where neglected everyone else in his life, other than his 2 friends, which died in the first season. He's feeling the trauma of that. But it's thanks to his love of video games and his dedication to just playing them and pretty much not doing anything else that he's able to use this knowledge to try and get through these games, which is what I really liked. And Season 2 blows it out the water. I really enjoyed Season 2. What I didn't really like all that much, and this is the only negative I can think of really, is that I didn't like how often all of our characters were separated, and they towards the end of the season they did brush over a couple of games just to get through to the finale a little faster. I get it, you don't want to drag it on for too long, you don't want to repeat the same things. I get it, so I'm not too mad about that. Or I'm not mad at all, but But the final 2 episodes, I think, are 2 of the best episodes in terms of TV that I've seen for a long time. The second from last episode, the action is just insane. We've got this guy who's the king of spades. He's going around, he's wasting all these people. He has free roam to go wherever he likes in this Borderland Tokyo, killing just whoever he sees. And then he pretty much wipes the floor with all of our characters. We have all of our characters tackling him at once, and he pretty much just wastes every single one and causes injury to them. And not just any kind of injury like you see in films where like someone gets slashed by a massive sword but still gets up and is perfectly fine. No, not here. The King of Spades causes life-threatening injuries to our characters. He almost kills Aguni, stabs Kuina. Oh, I'm so sorry. Stabs Kuina multiple times, stabs Usagi in the knees to the point where she starts bleeding out. Kills Anne, kills Shibuki. It's insane. The way this guy just flawlessly and effortlessly takes out all these people was a treat to watch in terms of action, scale, and choreography, and the camera angles and the way it's shot. It's so good, so good. I really enjoyed these action set pieces in this episode in particular. But if I want to get into what I really like about Alice in Borderland Season 2, is the final episode. Now, usually, finales can butcher quite a lot, but Alice in Borderland Season 2 had a great ending. and I generally mean that from the bottom of my heart, Alice in Borderland Season 2 has a great ending. So, in the final episode, Arisu and Usagi finally confront the Queen of Hearts, which is the final game. And all they have to do is complete 3 rounds of this putting game. I can't remember what it's called. It's an old 19th century English game. Anyway, all they have to do is clear 3 games of that. But since it's a Hearts game, things are a little bit different. If you remember from the first season, when you get a Hearts card, let me elaborate. A deck of cards, like spades, diamonds, whatever, they establish the difficulty of the game. In the first season, Arisu and his 2 friends come across a 7 of Hearts game. Hearts games play with your emotions. And obviously, in terms of the 7 of Hearts game, that's when Arisu's friends died because it plays with people's hearts. So Arisu survives and he has to live with the guilt of his friends just both died. But in this final episode, the Queen of Hearts tries so hard to get into Arisu's head to the point where the trauma of his friends and losing them and everything that he's been through leading up until this point, he ends up going into a psychotic meltdown and Usagi manages to bring him back. This, I thought, was excellent writing. The Queen of Hearts plays off all these different things in terms of, because Arisu wants to know the truth. He wants to know what Borderland is, what this world is. Can you return to the original world if you collect all these cards and survive? And so the Queen of Hearts really plays on his emotions here, because Arisu is desperate for answers. He kind of thrives in this world to try and get back. But he also won't hesitate to save his friends' lives, especially Usagi. And so, when the Queen of Hearts is playing off all these different things about what Borderland is, lying multiple times to try and get into Arisu's head, this was such good writing, and I can't praise it enough. Because when the Queen of Hearts started to explain what Borderland was, and then afterwards she's like, I'm just kidding. It's like, this girl is fucking with your head, Arisu. She's fucking with your head. Because she goes on to say that, these are just AIs, you're trapped in an imagination. And I was hoping it wouldn't be something like that. I was hoping it'd be something a little more unique. And it turns out it was something a little more unique. Obviously, I haven't read the manga or watched the anime, if there is an anime. But I haven't seen any of that. I don't know anything about Alice in Borderland outside of this show alone. So, to find out that Borderland is actually the realm between being dead and alive. So, for example, what actually happened was Tokyo was struck by a meteorite and it killed multiple people, fatally injured multiple people. So, before some people completely flatlined, they're in a state of being between dead or alive. You know, when like someone's heart stops for about a minute and then eventually they're revitalized. It's stuff like that. Time passes differently in Borderland. What could be a minute in the real world is an entire month or months or years in Borderland. I'm not exactly sure how long Arisu was in Borderland, but his heart gave out in the real world for exactly a minute. And at the very end of this show, the very last game, when Arisu and Usagi beat it, and the Queen of Hearts is killed, they're given the option to either accept permanent residence in Borderland, or they can accept to not stay. If they choose to stay, I'm guessing that means they die in the real world and live their life in Borderland. Or they can go back to the real world, wake up with no memories, and just live. It was perfect. And I think another thing that I really like about it as well is that this show really implicates how shit some people can be, but it also implicates how people's ideals can save other people's lives, and the difference in what life and death situations can do to people. Like, how would you act in a certain situation like that? Would you save yourself, or would you put others before you? Would your morals still be intact? This show tackles everything like that, and I absolutely loved it. The very end of the show, though, we get a little tease of outside the hospital where Arisu and Usagi wake up. There's a table. The camera pans into this table. There's a deck of cards on the table. Every card gets blown off this table except for the Joker card. This can mean one of two things. Either there's going to be a season 3, I really hope not. I'm only saying that because Season 2 wrapped things up so beautifully. I don't really want to see another season potentially ruin that. The same issue with Cobra Kai. Like, Season 5 wrapped up pretty much everything. Will Season 6 ruin it? Kind of the same with this. But with the 2 seasons that we've got of Alice in Borderland, these 16 episodes are perfect the way they are. I would like to think that the second option, the Joker, was a tease. A tease to say, the joke's on you. A tease to say that, make your own interpretation of what the Joker actually is. So I did exactly that. My interpretation of what I think the Joker card is, I think the Joker is the Grim Reaper, or Death, or something like that. Because if Borderland is the the borderline between living and dying, I think that the Joker is responsible for the games. I think the Joker is the one sending down these laser beams, killing people, blasting their heads open and stuff like that. That's just a theory that I have about it. The manga might confirm this, it might not. I haven't read the manga. I wanted to go in with a fresh perspective on what I thought. I didn't want to look at other source material to try and find out whether something was true or not. I wanted my own interpretation. That's what I think the Joker card is. So I don't think there's going to be a season 3. But if there is, I'm open to it. I'll watch it. But I don't know. I think things are wrapped up pretty nicely here. Alright guys, before I get so tired that I can't even speak anymore, let's get on to the final show of 2022. My favourite show of the whole year. Now, you might think with how much I praised Alice in Borderland Season 2 then, why isn't that number 1? Well, I think this one was a little more heart-gripping, was a little more sweet, was a little more in terms of characters and emotional growth. My favourite show and the number 1 spot on this list is Extraordinary Attorney Woo. I love this show so much. Everything from its character dynamics, from the acting to the court cases themselves, I think it's amazing. What I really do like is that this show pretty much revolves around our main character, Woo Young-woo, as an autistic attorney who was turned down quite a lot in terms of jobs because of her condition. Being on the autism spectrum disorder, she struggled to find work. But then she's hired by this law firm, and it turns out that she's hired by this law firm because of inside connections, because someone just gave it her, because of a personal bias or something like that. And so this plays on her emotions and stuff like that. And while there's a heavy focus on Woo Young-woo and her autism and how it affects her daily life and how it affects her relationships with people, it's not just about that. Like, not every single character you come across is mean to her or making fun of her because of her disorder. There's a lot of people who are understanding about it and some people who aren't, which obviously is very accurate to real life. So it's not just pulling a She-Hulk and saying like, oh, everyone's making fun of her because she's autistic. It's nothing remotely like that. You get people like that in the show, but not everyone is like it. So it sticks to the realism of what this disorder is, how it can affect your daily life, what it does to you, and how someone and an individual can live with it. And I thought that was beautiful. This show nails those aspects to an absolute T. Woo Young-woo's relationship with Junho and Attorney Jung, Attorney Kwon, and Seon, I think that's how you pronounce her name, I thought was amazing. The character dynamics between all of these people, Kwon eventually having an ulterior motive to try and get Woo Young-woo fired so he can get a job at a different law firm. Eventually his morals change and he learns to accept her for who she is. But it's just stuff like that. The characters in this show are so well written. The law stuff is not just all about murder and like who killed this guy and who killed that guy. Sometimes it's really, really simple stuff like copyright issues or talking about a certain landscape that like is going to be teared down, but like no, we're going to go to court because that piece of landmark is listed or something like that. There's a lot of stuff like that in this show. And while it's very difficult sometimes to keep up with the subtitles because there are a lot of big words used in this show, like compensation, defamation, all this massive law words in wordy stuff. Stuff like that. And if you can't read very fast, like me, you will struggle to keep up with the subtitles. I had to pause quite a bit to read what was going on or rewind slightly. But you know what? I was that invested in the characters that I just didn't care. The main actress that plays Woo Young-woo, she absolutely killed it. She killed it. She killed it in terms of how good she was. This performance was completely knocked out the park. It was a fucking home fucking run. And I said fucking twice then, so you know I'm fucking serious about this. I thought she was great. She nailed the characteristics of a character with this disorder, a character who has a charming personal likability to her, a character who has this condition and how it can affect the relationships around her, how she sometimes makes her relationship with Junho difficult for him, but then he loves her regardless. It's beautiful stuff. It's beautiful. And the actress knocked it out the park. She absolutely did. I thought she was so good. You know, nailing characteristics in terms of body movements and stuff like that, and the way she speaks, you know, going into immense depth with everything, like someone on the spectrum would be. But she doesn't do it in a way that's, like, offensive or anything like that. She actually pulls it off to a T. And I loved it. I loved it. And there were so many moments in this show where I just felt like tearing up because of how emotionally gripping it can be in places. But also towards the end, when Woo Young-woo feels this feeling of fulfillment that she has accomplished what she wanted to do, which is be a damn good attorney, a damn great person, a damn likeable person. And the show's also really funny in places too. I mean, like, who could forget this line here? You know, ooh to the young to the woo, down to the goo to the rummy. But yeah, so overall, those are my top 9 shows, and only 9 shows of 2022. We have She-Hulk Attorney at Law at the bottom, The Book of Boba Fett at 8, 7 Obi-Wan Kenobi, 6 Ms. Marvel, 5 Sonic Prime, 4 Cobra Kai Season 5, 3 All of Us Are Dead, 2 Alice in Borderland Season 2, and at number 1, Extraordinary Attorney Woo. That is everything on the list, guys. I've got through every single TV show that I liked, and wow, that's actually kind of tired me out a little bit. So, I really appreciate anyone who sat down and listened to me all the way through. You don't have to really watch this. It's a podcast. You can listen to it. Hopefully, I can get a permanent guest on at some point, but until that time, take it easy, guys. Peace in the Middle East. And, yeah. I fucked up my intro. As always, guys, I hope you have a fantastic day. Please consider clicking subscribe. I really appreciate it. Remember, it's not just a TV show. It's an experience. Take care, everyone, and have a good day. Happy New Year.